Good morning, Lee.
Good morning.
I assume.
Good morning.
Morning, no. Good evening, sir.
Yeah, evening. Where are you, Bjorn?
Sweden.
In Sweden. Okay, nice. I'm on the East Coast in the U.S., so it's morning for me.
Okay, then I was right with good morning to you.
Yeah, well done.
For me, it's not closing into midnight, but it's getting dark outside. So.
Oh wow, yeah. And is this is the time of year with very short days for you, right?
Yeah, it's closing into the very short days. I'm a bit above Jason in Uppsala, so my days are even shorter. But if I go to my cabin, which is the same distance even further north, yeah, the sun might not show up.
Wow.
Kind of. It's.
I have to admit, I watched this show on Netflix called Alone, where they take people up into northern Canada in the fall, and I'm just blown away. I can't relate to what that's like. This is the furthest north I've ever lived, and I'm much closer to the equator than you are.
Yeah, I mean, I was visiting a couple of friends in the Philippines, and the time difference of a day of the span of a year is 45 minutes, and in Sweden it's more like 24 hours the day span difference over the whole year. So in the northern part of Sweden, in the summertime, it never gets dark. It never gets dark. So you need to sleep with curtains, blind, and something from before your eyes.
Unreal. Yeah, I always wanted to come visit Sweden. In fact, when Jason reached out to me, I was like, I had this first initial thought. I was like, oh man, it would be so fun to go to Sweden to do this.
Yeah.
But maybe next year.
Next year, I hope.
Yeah.
Cool. So I assume that you are quite familiar how to use a computer. It looks like it.
I hope so.
Yeah, so you're able to share a screen. That's great. What I would like you to do, instead of sharing your whole screen, you could share only the window.
Okay.
In that way, we could get rid of your system bar.
Yes. Let me do that. Window. This. How's that?
How's that? That's much better. That's splendid, I would say.
Wonderful.
Okay, so a few keys here. You 5 minutes before, in 5 minutes, people will be able to join the session.
Okay.
So have something up as you do. You can create a poll to make people more interacting with you. It takes a village to become what? Parent, whatever. Yeah, we say that it takes a village to raise a child in Sweden. So, and then 5 minutes after your session is done, you will have about, where are you? You have 20 minutes. So after 20 minutes are done, you have 5 minutes of Q&A here in Hopin. After those 5 minutes, we want you to join over at uppstart.com/Q&A.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can do that. And how long should that last?
Forever.
Okay.
No, until you're done, kind of feel it. And then you got a Gather Town kind of event.
Okay.
Where you are in a 2D guide. So what I would do if I were you, I would create a poll and then I would click the link that Alexander Ito has shared with you in the chat with everyone else, and just familiarize in a minute or two, and then go back and get ready for your presentation.
Okay. So sorry, I'm creating a poll now. I can't multi-thread.
No one can.
All right. So after the session, I'll click the link. I'll pop over into the Q&A. We'll do some live Q&A there.
Yeah.
And then when that fizzles out, move
you
on.
You fizzle out as well.
Yeah, to whatever. Okay. Yeah. I have some meetings today, so I didn't reserve the entire day.
No. I mean, it will probably take 10 or 15 minutes, something.
Perfect. That's perfect.
It's a good way to meet other people as well.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, this is a new conference for me. I had never even heard of it until, and I don't mean any offense, I just hadn't heard of it until Jason had reached out. So I'm looking forward to kind of seeing the kind of people that show up.
No, well, it's actually quite, and it's it's on a rising. I would say in 10 years from now, it will be the biggest slush, maybe.
Wow,
Hopeful.
that's awesome.
I don't know.
That's
It's just
awesome.
one man
Yeah.
show still. It's just Jason, so we can. Oh no.
Wow, wow.
It's a few of us elks, not elks, but the dwarfs running around helping. But otherwise, it's.
Why is
I've been
Jason
with
so passionate about it? Like, what's driving that?
getting people together, creating. I think it's just like to create like this Silicon Valley feeling over Uppsala, like
Oh.
we can change the world together,
Mhm.
bring knowledge and share knowledge. I would say that
Got it. Yeah, yeah, it's awesome.
it's a village. It's a village of 200,000 people, Uppsala.
Wow, that's awesome.
So
We I love how you guys are going about this conference, by the way, because I just did this talk, a longer format version of this talk, for a firm that has only ever done in-person conferences until the last year, and you can just tell there's a big difference between an organization that's trying to create a really good remote experience and somebody who's trying to replicate what we used to do on site. It's a different goal,
yeah,
you know?
yeah. I mean, it's like if you compare Zoom to Microsoft Teams,
Right.
it's like,
Right.
what are they even trying to do? Come on, guys, just
Right.
leave it. Well, I need to
Yeah.
head on, Lee. I'm looking
Okay,
forward to
Bjorn.
see your presentation. Take care, mate.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate
Bye.
your help.
Of
Cheers.
course. Cheers.
Hope everyone can hear me okay. We're going to get started here in just a second. In the meantime, enjoy my ugly Christmas sweater. All right, we're right at, I guess, 1500 CET, which for me is 9 o'clock in the morning on December 3rd. I'm on the East Coast of the United States, so it's great to be with you today. Appreciate you spending some time with me, and I believe the session is getting recorded. I'm going to be hanging out in the Q&A afterwards too, just for a bit in case anyone wants to chat some there. So let's get it kicked off here. Today, we're going to be talking about relationships. We're going to be talking about change management and transformation. Before we get into that too much, I need to point out that today's talk is just my personal beliefs and opinions and perspectives. I do work for Edward Jones, which is an investment advice company based here in the United States. We operate in Canada and in the United States. But I'm not here as a representative of Edward Jones, just here sharing my personal opinions. Just a quick high-level introduction about me. So I started my career as a software developer, but went to college to learn how to be a history teacher. So everything I've done in technology has been sort of self-taught, just learning it piece by piece. I've been doing software development and change management for 20 plus years. And mostly in small to medium-sized startup companies, but a couple of larger companies. The last bit of my career here has been in financial technology and larger firms. Been everything from a software developer to a chief technology officer. My weird pandemic hobby I've picked up over the last year is fountain pens. I've gotten into restoring vintage fountain pens, and I just love learning about weird esoteric stuff like that. So drop me a line in chat if you've picked up any interesting hobbies over the last year. I think that's kind of interesting. Okay, so the goal for today is to talk about how relationships intersect with driving organizational change. And this is going to be true whether you're in a small company or a large company. If the company's been around for more than a couple of years, you're probably going through some kind of transformation. You're going to the cloud, you're trying to up your agile game, or both, which is usually the case. We could spend an hour just talking about any of these three activities: developing, selling, and measuring vision. As a change agent, these are the three activities I find myself cycling through constantly. None of these things are static, and it's not to me, in my opinion, this is not a journey. It's not like I go through a phase where I develop a vision, then I go through a phase where I sell it, then I go through a measurement phase. These three activities are happening constantly across the organization on a lot of different fronts. Vision is not static. It's not like a transformation's goal is to get to a finish line. Transformation is about creating an engine of improvement, of constant improvement. And so again, we could spend an hour just talking about any of these three activities. Instead, I'm just going to hit over the next 15 minutes or so a couple of stories to illustrate why relationships are so pivotal to all three of these activities. I see a lot of people who aspire to be a leader, who aspire to drive change, fall under the false idea that that is some kind of solo sport or solo activity. That's not true. Driving change in an organization is a team sport. That's why this talk is all about how it takes a village to drive change. So let's level set really quickly on what does it mean? What is vision? Martin Luther King said this really well. He said, a genuine leader is not a searcher of consensus, but a molder of consensus. Vision is a shared understanding about what the future should look like. It's a shared understanding. Okay. And so, if you're the only one in your organization who really understands where you're going, then probably not much progress is being made against it. You, as a change leader, have to go out and create a shared understanding of that by leveraging your relationships. So let's talk about relationships and developing vision. One thing I've learned in my career, or observed anyway, is that the people around me generally fall on a spectrum. On the one end of that spectrum are what I call eager beavers. These are people who are, well, you could spot them instantly. If you're in a conference room or you're on a call and you're talking about something like continuous deployment, pushing code out in the middle of the day, and I can tell you after working in financial technology for a long time, and healthcare technology, those are concepts that some people get very nervous about. But the eager beavers are the first ones to stand up and say, thank God you're here. I've been talking about these concepts for the last year. No one has listened to me. I can't get anyone to try this stuff. I need support. I need help. I'm so glad you're here talking about these things. On the other end of that spectrum are what I call Debbie Downers. That's a character from Saturday Night Live a long time ago. These are the people who have the opposite reaction. When you are in that same meeting and you're talking about continuous deployment, pushing out code in the middle of the day, they would be the first ones to stand up and tell you all the reasons why that's not going to work. They would tell you about how your predecessor failed to drive that change or deliver on that idea. It's almost like an understated threat. If you keep trying to do this, you're going to fail too. And so you have these two kind of polar opposite reactions to vision about when you're trying to develop that vision. Now, on the one side, the eager beavers are really important. When you're developing vision, you have to have strong relationships with your eager beavers. These are the people who will be your early adopters. They will be the ones that help you validate and prove ideas. We can talk about the state of DevOps report all day long, but I can tell you from my experience, that only goes so far. If you're talking to an executive and you're trying to get adoption or support for something you want to do, and all you can reference is external data, they're going to be very nervous or maybe reluctant to make huge bets on that. On the other hand, if you can reference external data and point to internal wins that prove that these things that work outside of your company also work inside of your company, then you will get a much different reaction. So you need eager beavers. My advice to you is you have to understand the constraints of where those folks are at, and you have to meet them where they're at. You might be thinking to yourself, well, Lee, the eager adopters in my company, they're still too limited in their perspective. You need to take that win and run with it. Don't get too hung up on trying to get them to expand too far beyond where they are today. Take that as sort of an idea about where your first victories are going to be. Meet them where they're at, help them accomplish the goals they're already excited about, and build on that momentum. On the other end of the spectrum, I have a lot of colleagues in the change management community that would say you should ignore the Debbie Downers. Just ignore them. Only focus on partnering with the eager beavers. You'll make faster progress. I actually think that's not great advice. And the reason for that is because once you start developing relationships with some of these Debbie Downers, these are the people that are skeptical, you'll start to learn a couple of things. Number one, those people in your organization have probably been with the company for a long time. They have strong reputations with senior leadership. The reputation is one of a hero, probably. They have saved the day several times in the history of your company. And so when you go to your senior leaders and start talking about where your vision is and what you're going to get accomplished over the next 6 to 12 months, they're going to ask you who you've worked with to develop that vision. They know who the eager beavers and the Debbie Downers are in the organization, meaning they know who the kind of newer joiners to the firm are who have big ideas. And they also know who they have relied on over the years to save the company in times of duress. If you only reference people who are newer to the company, who don't have those strong reputations, then your vision is going to be received differently than if you can loop in at least one of those Debbie Downers and say, I've also worked with this person and they're helping me to make sure that everything we're rolling out is going to be feasible, and we're testing it against some of our more legacy teams to make sure that we're not leaving them too far behind. When you can loop in some people who are generally viewed as reliable but skeptical to change, you will build your reputation as a change agent much stronger than if you only partner with eager beavers. Now let's talk about selling vision for a moment. The first point I want to make here is when you come into an organization as a branded change agent, there's a strong temptation oftentimes to look at the current environment and be critical of it. But I want to caution you against that. We talk about phrases like technical debt, and oftentimes technical debt is described sort of like credit card debt or unsecured debt. I would advise you to think about technical debt more like a mortgage. In the United States, when you purchase a home, most people don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars of cash. And so what they do is they go to a bank, they borrow the money, they take on debt in order to have a house to live in. I did that to have my house, and I'm happy with that decision. The debt that I owe that bank is good debt. It provides me with a really safe, warm house to live in, and it keeps my family safe from the elements. That's good debt, okay? Technical debt is more like a mortgage most of the time than it is a credit card debt. I'll tell you a quick story. So there's a guy I worked with who had been with the company for a very long time. And I remember he showed me a photograph of a conveyor belt, a physical conveyor belt. Okay. In one room, there were teletype machines that would receive information from field branches. It would print out a little piece of paper. The person at the teletype machine would look at it and check a couple of things to make sure they were there. If it was correct, they would actually insert it into the conveyor belt, and that physical conveyor belt would take that piece of paper into the next room where a different group of people would recheck that order. They would then enter it into a different machine, which would then go off to be executed on the stock market. That is an amazing feat of engineering in and of itself. This guy showed me this photo because he had been hired to create a revolutionary new system that was going to replace that physical conveyor belt. It was using a radical new technology called mainframe, and he was going to be using a computer programming language specially designed for this type of application called COBOL. Now, developers that I hired today out of college might look at that and say, oh my gosh, COBOL code, this is ridiculous. Like, this is a huge anchor that's holding us back from accomplishing our goals from a technology perspective. But that's a kind of a limited perspective. And if that's the attitude that you have coming in as a change agent, all those people that built these incredibly valuable systems that returned an immense return on investment, that helped the company grow to the state that it's in today, that created the environment for you to even have a job to come into. If you have this attitude that all that technology and all those decisions were bad and they're holding us back, then you're going to alienate all the people that built the company. Those Debbie Downers that we talked about probably contributed to some of that technology debt that you're looking at today and sort of scoffing at. You need their help to take this company forward. You can't do this alone. You're not going to be able to deliver on your goals without their support. So instead of having an attitude that this technology debt is bad and it's holding us back and it's not good, instead view it as the bridge that got the company to where it is today. And it built us up to this point. And now you're coming in as a leader to help unlock a lot of extra potential to take the company to the next level. So you're building on the successes of the past. You're not there to fix a bunch of mistakes. You're there to evolve the firm, okay? You'll find that you'll gain a lot of friends and allies that would eagerly help you deliver on that, as opposed to viewing some of these past decisions and technologies negatively. I'm going to skip over a couple of slides throughout this because this is an abridged version of this talk, so forgive me if you see something skip by. Another story I want to tell you, though, is another point I want to make is, as a change agent, I think oftentimes it's tempting to cast ourselves or brand ourselves as a knight in shining armor, that we're here to save the day. I had a colleague once tell me, Lee, you're a compass, you're a moral compass of engineering, a moral compass of engineering. And I remember at the time I felt good about that. I was like, wow, that sounds like a compliment. But the reality is that's kind of a weird way to think about things, because decision-making isn't moral. Your way to look at environments and evaluate, what we should do next is not morally superior to some other person's decision-making process. And if you let yourself fall down that path and start thinking of yourself as like a savior or something, then what's going to happen is you're going to end up creating binary conflicts instead of what you should be doing, which is talking about values and principles and goals and strategies. You will make the conversation about you versus someone else. So if you're listening to this talk and you're thinking about, kind of your current role and the environment that you're in, and there's a person that might be popping into your mind that seems to oppose you at every turn, that's holding you back. Consider for a second, have you allowed that environment to become you versus that person? Is when other people around you, when your leaders think about that conflict, are they thinking about you versus that person, or are they thinking about the principles and the values that each of you are espousing and being able to evaluate those against what the company's strategy is? So I'll tell you a really quick story, or try to make it quick to illustrate this. I was driving a DevOps transformation at a firm. We had a head of engineering there. He had a master's degree in electrical engineering. He was a brilliant guy. He had hand built our data centers all around the globe. You talk about Debbie Downers and saving the day. This guy had saved the company's bacon several times. Okay. He had saved the day over and over and over again. But what had happened was early in the company's history, the company didn't have much money. And so we would have some customer that wanted to give us millions of dollars for a contract. And so the dev teams would go off and they would build some new capability. They'd be ready to deliver it. They'd go to this head of engineering and say, here you go. I need all these new web servers and databases and job queuing servers. And he would look at that and say, oh man, this is $250,000. We don't have this money. If I wrote this check, it would bounce. So I have to figure out some way to utilize any extra capacity I can find in the database or in our current data centers and get this solution into production so we can sign this customer, get this money, and then we can go back and resolve these problems. Except, you've been there. As soon as you save that scenario, you don't have time to go back and fix things. You have some other emergency you have to go on to. So if you play that same scenario out over and over and over again for 5, 6 years, 10 years or more, you end up with a rat's nest of complexity in your data centers. And it was so hard for our teams to deploy new changes because they had to do all this manual coordination with all the other products that shared their infrastructure. So this is a really interesting story to me. I came into that organization with a charge to improve developer efficiency, decrease cycle times, increase our deployment frequency. The only way to do that was to spend a whole lot of money and increase our infrastructure footprint. Well, over the years, this guy had developed a central value system that said, no, I'm valuable to this company because I save us money on capital expenditures. I don't buy infrastructure. I get bonuses when I come in under budget. And so we had taught this person a value system that prioritized saving money over developer efficiency. Now, this person really didn't like me. I mean, looked me dead in the eye and told me he didn't like what I was doing and didn't like me, and would go around behind my back and try to kind of get people to oppose me. If I had thought of myself as an individual who was morally superior to this person and allowed the conversation to use words like right and wrong, then it would have cast that as a very personal conflict between a new transformational leader and a very well-respected engineering leader. That would have been very difficult to resolve. That's a sticky situation. Instead, I made sure that that conflict was always talked about in light of the goals of the organization. If the goals of the organization were to increase developer efficiency, get change and value out to the market faster, then here's the path to do that. We need to reshuffle our values. These values got us to where we are today. Fantastic. If we want to get to this level and you want to do that in 2 years, this is what we have to do. We're going to have to make some infrastructure investments. If you don't want to do those infrastructure investments, that's okay. It just means this transformation is going to take longer. It's your choice. So that way, senior leadership doesn't have to feel like they're doing some kind of personality conflict resolution. They're just looking at the strategy of the firm. And that allowed us to make some really good changes. And that firm went from doing a couple dozen deployments a month to doing 9,000 deployments a month, all through automation with no extra headcount. I'm really proud of that story. So I'm going to skip this, and we're going to talk about measuring vision just for a second. I just want to make 2 quick key points on this. Number one, measuring your vision is vital. Okay. You can't drive change without measuring the improvement that you're making to the organization. And that improvement needs to be founded on business outcomes. Don't fall into the trap of only relying on proxy metrics to measure whether or not you're driving helpful change in your organization. And that means you need to spend some time with your key leaders that you are demonstrating your value to help them understand the metrics that you're using to measure this change. Don't assume that they understand cycle time or velocity or predictability. You need to have some sessions with those folks, walk them through where that data comes from, and be open and transparent about the pros and cons of each of these metrics. Remember, metrics are abstractions. They take something that's very complicated, like a business outcome, and they reduce it into something that's really easy to see and understand. But you need to spend some time building that bridge of understanding with them. Otherwise, you might find yourself in situations where you get into semantic debates with people who are skeptical about what you're doing. And you don't want to be having those debates in front of key leaders. So spend time with those key leaders, helping them understand the metrics that you're using and why you're using them. Last point on metrics, don't overlook the value of an anecdote, meaning sometimes it can be really difficult to always go back to some kind of hard objective metric or number. Sometimes if you're trying to demonstrate the value of a learning program, for example, how do you do that? There's so many contributing factors to why an effort that had learning and development associated with it was successful versus some other one, some other effort, some other project that you didn't have a good learning and development program supporting, and that one failed. You could argue all day long about what caused one to win and one to fail. You can't reduce it just to learning and development. So what you can do, though, is look at these as different situations and say, who are the key contributors there? Who's respected? Who has a good reputation that contributed to these projects? And can I go to those folks and just ask them their opinion? Would they be comfortable making a statement about whether or not learning and development played a key role in this project succeeding? And that could be a metric or a measurement you could refer to that would resonate with decision makers as well. So think about people's reputations, think about their kind of relationship network in your organization. Who can you leverage to just give you some testimonials? That can also be a really good way to measure success. The key thing I want you to understand that is, from my perspective, based on my experience alone, my view is transformation in an organization will always be limited by the health of the relationships. And more to the point, your success as a leader driving change is going to be limited by your ability to build and leverage healthy relationships in your organization. Don't feel like you can just go out there with data alone and that's going to win the day. It is the fun thing about technology transformations is it's not about the technology. It's always about the people. So if you're a change leader, you're trying to drive change, that people relationship aspect is the most important piece. Okay, I'm about 3 minutes over time, but I really appreciate everybody hanging out. I hope this was helpful to you. I'm going to pop over here and stop sharing my screen, and then I'll pop into the Q&A session. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Katharina. All right, I'm going to pop into the Q&A now. I'll see you guys in a sec. Cheers.